In our next instalment, what we want to do is we want to take this jumper and apply our idea, our textile idea, to this particular jumper. In this instance, we're going to use some pattern work. Now, what we do really need to think about here is the attributes, the file sizes that we've started with. In this instance, this is an image that's come from the internet, therefore the resolution of this image is going to be fairly small. If we're looking at this image and we go image size, we can see that this image is 30 centimeters high by 20 centimeters across. It's approximately A4 size. If I go to a different image, if I go to this, which is a photograph of a paper structure that I've made, if I go to image size here, you can see this is much bigger. This is a digital photograph that I've taken with my phone. So this image is over a meter across. So we need to think carefully about what happens if we use this. I'm going to use this in this instance and show you how I can resize. So we'll come back to that in a minute. So let's just cancel for the moment and then go back to finding the photograph that we've just been dealing with. So what I want to do is I want to take this jumper out and I want to reveal through that hole a pattern. So what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to select the whole image, copy the whole image, paste the whole image. Now what that means is that's given me another version of that image. I'm going to come back to my background layer and I'm going to add a new layer. So what I've now got is an image on top and an empty space behind it. Working in this layer, and it's really important that when you're working with layers that you think about whether your auto select layer option is selected, because sometimes if you've got that selected, you can inadvertently select layers that you didn't think you did. This time I'm going to move down underneath the magic wand tool. I'm going to find the quick selection tool. I can change the brush size that I'm using here, and I'm simply going to select the jumper. As you can see, I've very quickly selected all the jumper. However, I've also selected part of the dress that I don't want. So I'm going to go to the minus version of that event and then click into that shape, which means I'll just sort of get rid of that little shape. Actually, I've gone a bit too far now. So if I go Command and Z, do that again, that will be fine. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste. So what I've now created, if I turn off my background layer and the layer beneath that, I've just got a jumper on its own. Now I've selected, or I've got this jumper on its own, so I'm going to go select load selection. Because what I want to do is I want to grab that jumper, but what I want to do now is come back to this layer, so I'll put the layer, make it visible again, and I want to hit delete. Now you won't see anything at the moment until I switch that top jumper layer off. So what I've now got is a hole in this illustration of where the jumper should go. What I can now do in this empty layer in here is paste my pattern. So I'm now going to go to here, select all of this, copy this, come back to that layer, and in here go paste. Now of course what we're seeing is hardly anything, and the reason for that is that what I've pasted into this layer is a really big photograph. So I need to transform the size of that photograph. So I'm going to go to my magnifying tool, hold the Alt key down, which will mean that I'm going to make the whole thing smaller, and I'm going to hit Command and T. And when I go Command and T, I'm now going to resize that much bigger image in this smaller image. Again, the new Photoshop default is that the proportions of the image are constrained. Once I'm happy with the resizing, I'm then going to go to my magnifying glass, this time hit Fit Screen. So we can now start to see this pattern applied to the figure. So we've now got a hole with a pattern through it. Now the pattern obviously that's gone onto this garment is fairly flat. So it'd be really good to think about how we can give that garment a bit more three-dimensionality. So let's just switch this layer back on. Well, this garment has a light side and it has a dark side. So I've got a number of ways of doing that. And the easiest way of doing that, if I switch this jumper back off for the moment, I'm going to be in this layer, but I'm going to add a new layer. So I want to now have an intermediary layer between my background, my pattern, and underneath the hole cut out of my garment. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go to my brushes. I'm going to choose a dark value, and I'm going to start to draw, obviously making sure that the opacity of my brush is not 100%. And I'm going to start to draw in some darker tones. I might also start to draw in some lighter tones. That starts to give a little bit more tone, but I've lost to a certain extent some of the texture of the original garment. So what I want to do now is I want to introduce some of that texture into this. So I'm just going to switch all my other layers off for the moment so we can just focus on that jumper. Working in this layer, what I want to do is I want to try to retrieve some of the textural information of this garment. So I'm going to adjust the threshold setting. So threshold is where does this image start becoming black, and we can alter that point. If I move the cursor to about here, I still have a certain amount of information about the creases and folds of the garment. So at the moment what I've got is I've got a jumper which is black and white. I'd like to remove the white. So I'm now going to move to the Magic Wand tool. The Magic Wand tool, if I click on the white, is now selecting all the things that are white. Because contiguous is unchecked, all the pixels that are white are being selected. If I deselect that, Command and D, and press contiguous, and then press white, only those pixels that are connected together are being selected. You'll note here that the pixels in the arm aren't selected. So if I hit Command and D again, uncheck contiguous, click on the white, all the whites are selected. Now I'm going to press backspace, which has now deleted the white. Now if I deselect and put that on top of all of my layers, we've now got a garment which has the texture of the jumper. It has the new pattern applied to it. Also I've got some mark making to give me a bit more of the form. I could have also used the dodge and the burn tool. So the dodge tool and the burn tool are over here. The dodge tool would allow me to lighten parts of the photographic image. The burn tool would have darkened parts of the photographic image, but obviously that's changing the original photograph. I could also decide at this point to apply an effect to the photograph. So I could decide to go to filter. At this point I obviously need to turn things back on again, so I'm going to go to here, make sure that that's it, I'm in this layer actually, that's what I really want. In here I might start to change the figure, so if I go to filter gallery, I could look at how I could use the cutout filter, for instance, to change the style of that figure, and changing the simplicity of the edge. I might prefer that more stylistically in keeping with my illustration. Now at the moment it might be really useful to have the background a different kind of quality. I might like to make the background out of focus. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to my quick selection tool, making sure I'm operating in this layer. I might make my brush a bit bigger. I'm now going to select sections of the background. Okay, there's my background selected. I've got some of the head selected, so again, go to my minor setting. Probably some of the hairline I don't want altering as well, so I just select that area here. So now I've selected the background. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to go to filter, and this time I'm going to go to blur. And again, if I go to my Gaussian blur, I can change the level of blur of my background. So I'm happy with it compositionally. Deselect, and there is my final illustration.